Hello and welcome to the July installment of our Oregon Building Performance Standards webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the exemption applications and the processes for applying for an exemption within the Building Performance Standards program. My name is Blake Shalide. I guess we can go ahead and I guess we'll get started now. I'm just looking at the clock. It's 10:59, but might as well go ahead and get started and folks will log in. My name is Blake Shalide. I manage the codes and standards section at the Oregon Department of Energy. And I'll let the rest of the team, the ODO team here, introduce themselves briefly before we get started.
Hi, I'm Madeline O'Dwyer. I'm a policy analyst in the codes and standards section, and I mostly focus on BPS.
Hi, I'm Ken Davies, a program analyst in codes and standards, and I work entirely on BPS.
I'm Judy Stockwell, and I'm the public service representative for the codes and standards team.
And I'm Lisa Gartland. I'm a facilities engineer with codes and standards, working a lot on BPS. And we have a couple team members out today. So anyway.
Right. Yeah, some other folks might be familiar with Andrew Johnson, who heads up some of our incentive program work too. So who's not here today. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is the slide that we like to just lead off all of our presentations with. I think most folks are familiar with our mission and what we do, but we also like to tie that back to our specific work here with building performance standards and how that really aligns with our mission of making informed decisions, maintaining a resilient and affordable energy system, and advancing solutions. And in particular, what we do, the BPS fits really well within each of these bullet points. I think it's a central repository for energy data. We are going to be collecting a lot of really valuable energy data for the existing building sector in Oregon, venue for problem solving, reducing energy and greenhouse gas emissions in the existing building sector, educating folks on how to reduce their energy. It's got a regulatory component to it, and it's an energy program. There's incentives associated with it to help building owners achieve early and voluntary compliance with the BPS. Okay, next slide. Just a reminder on how to use Teams. There's a chat function where you can put in any questions that you have as we go along today. Raise your hand feature, reactions all along the top. I believe everybody is muted by default today. But once we get to the Q&A portion, we can unmute you if you do have a question that you wanted to voice verbally instead of just putting it into the chat. We can definitely do that. But we are, because we're recording this presentation, just going to move through our staff presentation. And then at the end, we'll compile all the questions and get to those. But I think we should have plenty of time. We've got an hour and a half today, including Q&A. So we should have plenty of time at the back end to get to any questions that you do have related to exemptions on the BPS process. Okay, next slide. So today's agenda, we're going to go over what exemptions are available, what documentation is needed when you go through the process of submitting for an exemption, what are we looking for as an agency as we're reviewing to determine whether or not one of the exemption criteria is met, and then what is the process within our software, the BEAM software, that we use for BPS compliance in general, and specifically as it relates to today for submitting a Form X to apply for an exemption. Okay, next slide. This is the graphic that I think most folks are probably already familiar with, so I won't go into it in too much detail. And if you've got more questions on, in general, what buildings are covered, what's the scope of the Oregon Building Performance Standard, I would direct you to reference one of our earlier webinars on BPS 101. But just in general, the BPS covers buildings. Tier 1 buildings are those 35,000 square feet and larger, non-residential hotel and motel. Tier 2 buildings are divided into kind of two separate categories: special use, special Tier 2 buildings, and then regular Tier 2 buildings. And this graphic kind of illustrates where those buildings fall. but I won't go into it in too much detail. And then this is just kind of a graphical or a table representation of that graphic, displaying the compliance dates that start for the largest buildings, for largest tier 1 buildings in June of 2028. Tier 2 buildings need to report their energy usage by July of 2028, and then kind of phasing in the smaller tier 1 buildings over the next couple of years after that, depending on their size. Next slide, please. And then just as a reminder of the general requirements for tier 1 and tier 2 buildings, both tier 1 and tier 2 buildings need to benchmark, need to compare their energy use to those of similar buildings, determine what their energy use target is, and calculate their energy use intensity and report that to ODO. But then tier 1 buildings have additional responsibilities, including attesting to an operations and maintenance program and an energy management plan. And then if a building is not meeting their energy use intensity target, there are a couple other pathways in order to comply, but in general, it would need to take action to reduce the energy use if that energy use intensity target is greater than their EUI, or if their EUI rather is greater than their energy use intensity target, including performing an energy audit, possibly doing a life cycle cost assessment to phase in energy efficiency measures, and then implementing those measures. We've also presented in past webinars about the role of defined energy professionals. So within the BPS, there's a qualified person role, there's a qualified energy manager role, and then there's a qualified energy auditor role. Each of those plays a specific part along the BPS compliance pathway, depending on the type of building and depending on the specific action that's needed. Please reference back to that webinar for more information there, but just a reminder that there are specific energy professionals that can perform certain tasks within the BPS program. Okay, next slide, please. I think here's where I turn it over to Madeline to get into really the heart of today's presentation about exemptions.
Thanks, Blake. So thank you everyone for being here. Today we are talking about exemptions. Before we go into each type of exemption, I do want to pull your attention to the 2 gray boxes on this slide. On the top, we have a reminder that historic buildings are not exempt. However, if you are processing a historic building that is a tier 1 and it is not meeting its energy target, please note that although the entire building is not exempt, the standard states that you do not need to install any energy efficiency measures found in the ASHRAE Level 2 audit that would compromise the historic integrity of the building. Our second note is in the bottom gray box. There is a reminder that federal and tribal buildings are not covered by the BPS. There is an option in Form X to identify your building as federal or tribal, but it is not considered an exemption. For more information on the different scenarios of these 2 types of buildings, please see the guidance document that's linked on the screen. Okay, now let's talk exemptions. There are 6 possible exemptions a building could apply for, and we're going to go into each one, what they mean, what type of documentation we as ODO want to see, and please note that there could be multiple exemptions that could apply to a single building, but regardless of the exemption chosen, the same application needs to be taken, and each exemption lasts for the same amount of time, which is the 5-year cycle. I do want to remind everyone that these slides are posted on our website, and to please put your questions into the chat. We'll get to all of them or most of them at the end of the presentation during the Q&A format. Now, I mentioned the guidance document very briefly on the previous slide, and I just want to take some time to talk through where you would find all of our guidance documents. Our guidance documents can be found in the Beam Help Desk by clicking through the knowledge base into Guidance, Forms, and Tools, and then into the Oregon BPS official guidance documents. Here you'll find downloads of the suite of ODO created guidances. And also, after hearing feedback from all of you, we are reposting the guidance documents back onto our ODO homepage. Please note that the URLs actually don't change. It's just going to be in this secondary place, but it's the same information. So now you'll be able to find these resources in 2 different places, on the Beam Help Desk, as well as on our official Odo BPS page. Okay, let's dive into the first type of exemption. This first one is a manufacturing industrial space that is greater than 50% of the building's area. The important part of this definition is bolded for your convenience, and that's manufacturing and industrial is defined in the standard as a use classification of factory group F or high hazard H. So this classification is what Odo will be looking for in the documentation that you provide. If we do not see this designation of factory group F or high hazard H, the application will be denied. However, right now, instead of just flatly denying applications, we are just asking for more documentation and starting a conversation with the building owner. So maybe later in the process, we will just deny it off the bat. But right now, we know we're all trying to figure out this system and the best way to communicate everyone's needs. And so we need the factory group F or high hazard H classification for the approval. And until you get that, you show us that, it just won't be approved. A floor plan should also be included in your documentation so Odo can confirm the 50% part of this exemption. There are several examples listed on the slide of documents where you can find the factory group F or high hazard group H designation. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you an example. So here's an example of a documented imported for a manufacturing industrial exemption. In yellow, I've highlighted the type of document. You'll see at the top, it is a certificate of occupancy, as well as what we're looking for. And that's on the bottom left. You can see that it says it says occupancy type F2. Okay, moving on now to agricultural exemptions. There's a lot of text on this slide, and for this, I apologize as a presenter. But since all of these slides are available on our website, we do want to put all the relevant information so all of you can use not only this presentation, but these slides for future reference. This slide talks about what is defined as an agricultural building and what is not defined as an agricultural building. I'm not going to read the whole slide, but I'm going to pull out some highlights. An ag building includes, but is not limited to, storing, maintaining, or repairing farm or forestry machinery and equipment, as well as raising, harvesting, and selling crops or forest products. An ag building does not include a structure used for public or home use. Now that we've gone over what is and is not an agricultural building, let's talk about the documentation we need to see to confirm that this structure is used for agricultural purposes. The list for document examples is continuing to grow. So if you don't see something on the screen right now, please still try to send it to us, and we will add it to our internal list of documents that are easy for us to push an application through. The list that's on the screen now are types of documents that when they're sent to us, we are typically able just to hit exemption approved without asking for further documentation. But I'm not going to read through this entire list. It is here again for your future reference. However, on the next slide, I do have 2 examples. The screenshot on the left shows a CAFO permit, CAFO standing for Confined Animal Feeding and Operation. And the screenshot on the right shows farmers insurance in the form of a commercial farm declaration schedule. These two are examples of documentation that if you send it in with your exemption application, it's easy for us to move you through and approve the exemption. Our third listed exemption is financial hardship. This time I will read out what the standard defines as financial hardship, since that also pairs with the type of documentation that we would look for. So financial hardship is defined as one of the following: building on a city or county tax lien sale list over the 24 months before compliance date. Court-appointed receiver controls the building due to financial distress. Financial institution owns the building due to borrower's default. Owner acquired the building via a deed in lieu of foreclosure within the 24 months before compliance date. And a building has a senior mortgage that is subject to a notice of default. Okay, we are almost halfway through now. Our fourth type of exemption is a certificate of occupancy for less than 12 months. This is most relevant to new builds, and it's when a building has not had any occupancy in the year before their compliance date. Document examples I have here as a certificate of occupancy example of what it looks like. In most cases, this certificate of occupancy is recommended or required to be posted in a public space. This particular example is for a factory F exemption, which you can tell by the occupancy type. There's a yellow star in the middle of your screen here. And you can see the F2 occupancy type. Obviously, this certificate of occupancy is for a building that has been occupied for over 12 months before the compliance date. This is a hold for what a certificate of occupancy could look like. Okay. Our second to last exemption type is physical occupancy less than 50%. And I want to take a second to read the definition of physical occupancy from the standard. Physical occupancy is when a building space is leased or in use. So these spaces are considered unoccupied when at least 50% of gross floor area is not leased or otherwise in use. So we're looking for unleased space, not uninhabited space. And this is most easily shown through rent rolls or other lease documents. I'm just going to take a second to repeat what I said in the slide in a different way, because there is some confusion here. If you have a building that is leased, and maybe it's an office, and everyone in that office works from home, no one comes into that office. However, they've paid their lease through the year. That space in the eyes of Odo is occupied. So we only see physical space as unoccupied when it's completely not leased. All right, our final exemption. And I know we've been going through these kind of fast, but this one is pretty fun. This is an exemption for conditioned space is less than a tier's gross floor area threshold. It's an interesting exemption because this exemption request could either exempt your building from the program for the entire 5-year cycle, or it could bump your building down from a tier 1 to a tier 2. On the top of the page, we have the definitions of conditioned space, which goes through specifics on what is considered heated space, cooled space, as well as indirectly conditioned space. Now, it is hard to prove not conditioned at all as a building, since it's always hard to prove a negative. In these cases, so in case of, say, a storage facility with no HVAC system, we ask for photos of the building inside and out. We also would like to see floor plans, since it's helpful to give us an idea of what the photos are actually showing us. Now, if a portion of your building is heated in one way or another, then we are going to want to see mechanical schedules from the building's drawings that show HVAC capacity. However, if those are not accessible, photos of the HVAC equipment and nameplates to help confirm the BTUs per hour per square feet is the route that we would go. So that's going through the 6 types of exemptions. And I'm excited to see what type of questions you have in the chat. But for now, I'm going to pass it off to Ken to go through some demos on our software as well as wrap us up.
Thanks, Madeline. So you just heard a lot about the what of exemptions, and this is the how you go about doing that. When you're logged into your building owner portfolio page, you're going to navigate using the left-hand navigation bar and click on New Ticket, and then select the Form X exemption application. One thing to note is that before you can do the exemption application, you need to go ahead and claim your building, even if you feel like it's going to be a very strong case to get that exemption approved. Claim your building first, same route, new ticket, claim my building form, get that done, and then go to the exemption application and fill that out. Next slide. We're about to look at the form itself, but this is just a snapshot of that. You're going to select the exemption type from a drop-down menu, click the appropriate boxes, and attach the appropriate documentation. So let's take a look at that form. Everybody seeing that okay? So this is a little bit newer version that's going to be on the portal next week. But in the meantime, there is an existing Form X exemption application that you can go to and fill out. As with many of our forms for the Oregon BPS, we have a pre-populate function. So if you know your UBID, you drop it in there.
Hey,
Quick
Ken, could you zoom in a little bit so we can see the screen a bit more clear?
Sure.
Thank you.
I know how to do that, though.
Typically, if you press Control on your keyboard and then use your mouse wheel.
Better?
Nice. Perfect.
Okay. So we pre-populated the information that we have in the database on that particular site. Starts dropping in a few areas that are blank right now because I don't think this one has been claimed yet. Complete that information if it's blank. And then we see that this property type happens to be agricultural. So we're going to select that reason for exemption. And then we're going to say that we are chicken farmers. So then I'm going to upload my documentation that supports my claim for exemption. In this case, that's probably that CAFO permit, the confined animal farming operation, I think it says. I'm going to upload that, and then maybe in a different example, it's manufacturing industrial. I might attach another file with photos or site plans and things like that. You know, go ahead and throw it at us. If it helps, you think it's going to help your case get approved, we'll look at it for sure. And then the rest is just kind of certification, your name, email, things like that. We review these sometimes instantaneously, if you give us that certificate of occupancy, for example, that has the right designation, those are going through quickly. Other ones we review on a weekly basis so that we're keeping ourselves in alignment in terms of what is going to work. And then we expand our examples of everything that we're accepting and adhere to that. That's basically the exemption presentation. And I think we're ready for Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Ken and Madeline. We did get a couple questions in the chat, and I'll start with those, but folks can definitely feel free to keep adding questions in the chat, and we'll capture them. And also, if you just want to voice your questions, we can unmute you, and you can ask them that way. But the first question, and I think this one is probably for Lisa. The question is, it's not clear how the manufacturing industrial space exemption would apply to a manufacturing campus with multiple buildings, some classified as high hazard group H and one as an office building.
Okay, that's an easy question. So you might have a campus and you might have submitted, or you might have a campus, it doesn't matter. And if you want to get an exemption for that campus, you don't really do it on a campus-wide basis. It's on a building by building basis. So each exemption form you fill out is going to be for just one building, one UBID, that's it. If you have a campus and you call it a manufacturing campus, it might be in a manufacturing zone. Not all of your buildings may be classified as manufacturing. As you mentioned, you have one that's an office building, or might not have at least 50% of manufacturing space, in which case those buildings, an office building on a manufacturing campus or even in a manufacturing zone, is not eligible for an exemption, would not be exempt from our program. We would still want you to do all the benchmarking and reporting that's required. So it's really just confined to individual buildings that meet that 50% threshold for manufacturing and industrial space. I think that was a thorough answer, but I hope it was clear.
I think
Phil,
so,
looks
but
like
I
Phil
think
has a
maybe the
follow-up,
question, the
so.
answer. So yeah, I think if you want to follow up, Phil, if you've got a clarifying follow-up question there, if we can unmute.
Can we unmute Phil? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
We are only given one unique building identifier for the entire campus. So how do we go about designating the different buildings?
Yeah, so if you only have one UBID and you need to add these other buildings, there is an add my building form, and you can input each building one at a time, and then we in the background scramble around and get a UBID for that building for you.
Got it. Thank you.
And
Right.
then you can claim an exemption for it. There was one thing that I wanted to also clarify that Ken mentioned. On the Form X exemption, there are these data bits that come up that are on file for the building, and you can't actually enter anything in there. Those are just read only. So if there's a field that's grayed out, you can't enter anything in it when you're doing our online forms. It's just an informational field. If you feel like you want to update that or it's important, you can always go back to revise. There's some building correction forms or verify my building forms. We're in the process of updating our forms. So, but you should be able to figure out, there's a form available for updating any information you want to update, or you can include that information in your Form X with your documentation uploads. So, so that we're clear on what's happening. I hope, does that make sense, Phil? Did we get your
Yes.
question answered? Okay,
Absolutely. Thank you.
thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, good question. Next question. I think, Lisa, this one's probably back to you too. Would an unleased space that is still heated or cooled be considered vacant for the target tool?
Yeah, I think the target tool has, if you try to put a vacant space in, it will say, hey, only use vacant space if it's not heated, not cooled, and also if it is not even lighted or being lit. So you have all your systems turned off basically in that space. That's the only time you should call it a vacant space. A lot of times people have space and they'll have lighting, or they might have even a minimal amount of heating or cooling going on, as you know, because they want to keep it from freezing, or well, nobody's going to freeze in Oregon, but you know what I mean. If they want to keep it ready for tours or whatever, if you're trying to lease the space. But really, we expect everything to be turned off in that space in order to call it a vacant space.
Great, thanks. The next question is about the investment criteria pathway. Is there a minimum number of ECMs or energy conservation measures and total impact that must be shown as meeting simple payback and should be implemented to reach compliance? And then there's a little bit more to that question. Is end of life of existing equipment accounted for when analyzing the cost effectiveness of a system replacement? For example, an energy conservation measure would be effective, but we propose waiting 10 years for the replacement when the existing system meets end of life rather than immediately. Would we still meet compliance? So, yeah, it's not related to exemptions here, but I think we can probably address this one real quick.
Generally, we expect your energy auditor to look at every potential energy conservation measure, right? They're supposed to do a thorough level 2 audit, turn up every single opportunity, and then they would evaluate each opportunity to, one, make sure it does meet either simple payback, or you might do a life cycle cost analysis to make sure it meets guidelines to show that it's cost effective, because we do not want people to have to implement measures that are not cost effective. As far as a minimum number, really, we expect you to do all of them, but you can basically quit at the point where you feel like you've implemented enough measures that will get you below your energy target, your EUI target. So I guess that's the minimum, is keep going, and you can stop when you hit your EUI target, right? Now, you might not have enough to get you to the EUI target, which is unfortunate, but you'll have done your best. And then the end of life. Is end of life accounted for? Yes, it definitely is. However, just because you have a piece, say you have an air conditioner and it's still got 7 years of useful life, we don't expect you to replace that air conditioner right away. However, if it's within, we expect you to put it at the very least on your energy management plan and have it queued up for that building. So when you go to replace that equipment, or heaven forbid, if that equipment fails, it will be replaced with the whatever it is you've specified, more efficient equipment or whatever. And at best, you would put this on, you would do the investment criteria with conditional compliance, which allows you to implement energy efficiency measures after the compliance state. And so you would have, like, until the end of this entire cycle from 2025 to 2030, you might be able to implement that measure sometime a little bit later. Did that answer your question, Drew? Give us a thumbs up or wave or something, hopefully. All right, well.
It sounded good to me, but yeah, if there's any other follow-ups, please do ask. Okay, I think the next question is for Madeline. If we have 3 reasons for exemption, do we need to file 3 separate Form X's?
That's a great question, and the answer is no. You only need to submit 1 exemption, even if a building has 3 types. It could fall under 3 types of exemption. Each exemption has exact same power. You don't get to stack exemptions for like more years. So we just need one reason to put you on the exemption list and notify the system and the state that there's you're exempt for the next 5-year cycle. So do whatever exemption is the easiest. If you are a factory group F and you can't find a document that shows that designation, but you're also unconditioned and are able to show floor plans easier, then we want you to prioritize the easiest exemption, because it doesn't matter to us or the program what exemption you're using. It's just, we just need to see some type of documentation.
I just want to step in and make sure it's per building, though. Every exemption form is just for one building. You may have multiple reasons, but you only need to tell us one per building. If it was 3 reasons for exemption for 3 different buildings, you would need to file 3 separate Form X's, one for each building. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Okay, the next question is, what documentation can be used to prove the factory exemption? Madeline, you want to take this one? And I think you put some other follow-up info in the chat already too.
Yeah, I put some of what was on the slide in the chat as well. And when we're talking about factory and industrial exemptions, the bold capitalized letters that you need to remember is this factory group F high hazard H designation. We need to see that occupancy type as either an F or an H in order to approve that type of exemption. So documents that have been passed for this exemption already include a certificate of occupancy, a fire inspection document, and I think we also approved one that had it on their permanent drawings, the occupancy type. So if you're going for factory group F, high hazard H, manufacturing industrial exemption, that's the designation that we need to see.
I do also want to step in because some factories will have like a little office space in the corner or something, or, could be more than a little office space. We don't know. So what you really need to do, if you give us a certificate of occupancy, it will list factory group F, but it might also have some kind of B occupancy, which would be office. So if you have that extra, another non-factory group F or high hazard H occupancy, please also include a floor plan so that we can confirm that your factory or high hazard space is at least 50% of the building. So that's if you don't include it, we'll get back to you and ask for it if we see that there's more than one occupancy type. So.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline and Lisa, for providing a great answer to that question. Okay, the next question is related to the unconditioned space or semi-heated space exemption. And it's for a building such as a mechanic or tire center with open bays, would the heaters used for frost protection in the bays make the bays be considered conditioned space? The bays are otherwise not heated or cooled.
You're going to ask me to do that one, right? Yes, they would be heated. That would be a heated space. And what you would need to do is take a photo of any and all heaters and then do a close-up photo, because there's something called a nameplate on one of these heaters, and it will show what we call the heating capacity of that unit. It's usually in BTUs per hour. BTUs per hour capacity, and we'll need to see that. And generally what we'll find for these things is that the BTUs per hour total for all of these little heater units divided by the floor area of the square footage, generally for these kind of heaters, it's not enough it would make it what we call a semi-heated space, but not a fully heated space. And so we can do a little math and figure that out for you if we know how many heaters you have and what their capacity is. So
Right. So I think short answer there is maybe it could turn it into a heated space or a conditioned space. But like Lisa was mentioning, if it's above or below those thresholds, which are 8 BTUs per hour per square foot or 12 BTUs per hour per square foot, depending on whether you're on the east side or west side of the state. So, but it becomes just an analysis to see how much heat capacity there is in the entire space to determine whether it falls over or above those thresholds.
Right, and they generally don't for those kinds of
Yeah.
little space heaters, but we will need to check.
Yep. Okay, next question, rolling through the list, is for Madeline. What if we have 2 U-bids for the same property?
Great question. If that happens, we only need 1 U-bid per property. So if that happens, please send us an email. I'm muted. I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna restart. I don't know when I started muting. So great question. 1 U-bid per building. So if you do have, if you find that you have more than 1 U-bid per building, please send us an email either through the address I put in the chat or through a general inquiry for in the Beam help desk. What will happen is that we'll see if you have a preferred number or a U-bid that's more accurate, and we'll delete the other one and just make sure that all of our systems are lining up to reality.
Great, thanks, Madeline. Next question, I think, is back to Lisa. If the unleased space in a building isn't over 50% of the total gross floor area, what activity type should be used?
I see, that's a great follow-up question. Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, so if it's not vacant, remember we talked about vacant being not heated, not cooled, and not lit, which is often not the case. Then what you should do, what the guidance says, is to use whatever activity type was being used the last time it was leased. So if it was an office, use an office. If it was a retail, use retail. So whatever it was before, just use that.
Great, thanks, Lisa. The next question, I see there's a question in the chat from Morgan Schmidt-Peterson that looks like a fairly detailed question that might just be warranted for just some more detailed conversations offline. We'd love to help you figure out your specific situation. But it looks like a relatively complex question that we might just want to talk through specifically with you, if that's okay. But we'd love to. And if you want to schedule something with the team, we'd be happy to walk through your situation.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We have a large building over here that's kind of broken down into multiple suites and is rented out by multiple tenants. And the majority of this space is used for manufacturing. Probably 3 of our tenants do manufacturing, and they have the majority of the space. And then there's 2 to 3 other spaces that are smaller that don't do manufacturing, but they're all connected. Some of them are becoming vacant in the next year or so. And then we have 1 separate building that's a truck shop that's been vacant for over a year. And when I go online, there's multiple UBIDs, I think, like for the different suites inside the main building. But only one of them looks like it's actually classified. And I know you said we can maybe delete some of the other ones. So I know I need to send you guys an email. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to know what the best plan is for that.
Morgan, I'm typing out an email to you right now.
Oh, sweet.
So we can just talk about this offline.
Okay.
In general, to answer the question, when you have this type of, what are we doing here? The best thing to do is email us, and we're more than happy to walk through these unique situations. whether that's removing properties, adding properties, or just talking through the scenario with you. So I'm going to send you that email right now. And for everyone else, send me an email and we can do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good questions. Yeah, happy to talk through any specific scenarios with any building owners or managers out there. The next question is, we are a large-scale greenhouse operation, which would qualify us for an exemption, but we also have a separate address for a diesel shop on the same property in Oregon. How do exemptions work under that circumstance? So I'll start, and if anyone else on the team wants to add in, but exemptions are per building. So if you have two separate covered buildings at the same address, if one is exempt, you could apply for an exemption for that, potentially be granted an exemption, but you might still have another building on the same site. If it's also a covered building, if it's large enough, if it's over those thresholds, that could maybe not qualify for that same exemption, and it would continue to be and remain a covered building that would need to meet the building performance standard. Yeah, is anything else anyone else wants to add to that response? If not, okay. The next question is not an exemption question, but will there be one of these webinars on energy management plans? If so, do you know approximately when this might happen? We are continually taking ideas and input for what would be a really helpful future webinar, and thanks for that input. I think we can get one scheduled on those sort of topics, but we don't have a date for you now. But we're continuing to set out our schedule for the remainder of the year. We may take August as a summer break, but then we'll pick it back up after that. But keep an eye on our website. I see a +1 for a webinar on energy management plan. So heard, we'll look at that and build that into our schedule. Okay, I am not seeing any other questions, but I'll ask members of the team if I missed any.
Well, I will just say that I think it's a great idea to do a webinar on energy management plans and maybe additionally an operations and maintenance program, just because I know that there are people on this call and in this program who have buildings in both Washington and Oregon. And so it'd be a good opportunity for us to showcase some of the differences in the requirements that we are asking versus Washington's program.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but let me know if you've asked a question that we might have missed, and I think we can hang on for another couple of minutes in case folks do have more specific questions. But thanks everybody for attending today, asking some really good questions. Thanks for your interest in the BPS program, specifically the exemption process, and thanks to the ODO team for providing a great overview.
And we're looking forward to seeing your exemption applications, because exemption is a form of compliance.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right, I think we're probably good to call it. Well done. Thanks, team.